Hello guys, Hydra here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing one hell of a rant about progression within ARPGs, and believe you me, this is a very relevant topic for Inquisitor right now. You will be noticing a little bit of Diablo 3 footage in the background. The relevance of that will become clear later on into the video. But for now, let me kick things off by saying within the recent forum post we did find out that the tiered power levels, so a group of power levels, will have the same damage tables for every weapon. That being said, all certain weapons will have access to certain ranges of damage within, let's say, the first 10 to 15 power levels. Then you reach a new tier, that particular weapon will up its damage and you'll move forward. So not every single power level will represent a transition in terms of how much damage you're doing. So this is a very interesting new step, and already there's a few cries of, but I want to do more damage. If I'm not getting more damage per power level, why the hell am I playing the game? And well, this did get me thinking a little bit about the nature of progression and loot-based systems. And let me start off by defining what really progression means within this context. What we mean in a loot-based system, when there's a progression in terms of damage, it means every item you pick up is better than the last one. So that means not only for every new level you reach you get access to a better tier of weapons, but there are lots of different weapons within that tier. Combine that with the fact that you've got about 15 different items on a character slot, and you've also got about, well, somewhere between 80 to 200 different levels depending on your ARPG. What you get from this is inflation. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the main theory here, or the main concept, is that human beings are driven towards getting better stuff that makes them feel like they're basically progressing. And the way this works is it's much like a TV commercial. It's much like any of those adverts you've seen trying to sell you a hair gel that basically implies if you buy this product, you're going to be surrounded by attractive women. And if you don't, you're not good enough. That is really the core philosophy of progressive content and for all advertising in the world we live in. Buy my shit or you're inadequate. And while it doesn't come across that way, that's the psychological, or rather sort of subconscious message they're delivering. They're making you feel guilty for not buying something rather than making you feel happy for buying it. And that, at least for me, and this is talking about my very personal perspective, but for me, when I play a very loot-orientated game, such as Diablo 3, I feel peeved that I don't have the weapon I need. And I work and I work and I work to get it, and then I get it. It makes the content a little bit easier, so I up the difficulty, and then I'm in the same spot again. So 90% of the time, I'm pissed off that I'm not as good as I want to be. And I'm basically... it turns you into that spoiled kid at Christmas that's just ploughing through presents saying, where's the iPad, where's the iPad, where's the iPad? And then you find it and you find out the iPad 2 is coming out next week. But that is on repeat constantly. And for every piece of joy that it brings and motivation it brings for a player to play the game, I also think it delivers a fair bit of frustration. So that aside, I would like to talk about the actual objective issues of progression as well within ARPGs, because that subjective experience is something I can only really say applies to me personally. I do find I get a bit depressed if I play too much of a loot driven game. I just find it sucks the soul out of me. But in terms of actual objectivity, so let's take our 15 items we've got on our character, and we've got 200 levels we're going to progress through. So we've got 200 variations of the same item getting better and better and better and better. What this means is inflation. It means every single one of those items will be getting better as you go along. So what this does is it creates a range of damage, ranging from absolutely crap to freaking unbelievable. Put this into the Diablo 3 sort of system, because this game has done this sort of in a textbook way. In this system, if I change 4 rings on an item, 4 items on my current weapons set, my skeletal mage damage goes from 64 million, might sound like a big number, but that goes up to about 9 to 16 billion. Okay, so what you have there, and that's changing 4 good items for 4 other good items that just so happen to be more appropriate, is you get a fucking massive shift in damage that's completely unfathomable in terms of how different it is. Basically, you go from being completely feckin' useless to being completely feckin' broken and overpowered by changing one specific feckin' item. And this is actually a real problem, because what you end up with is, although you've got all of these different items in the game, there will always be one or two combinations that just work together perfectly. And what that means is they are then the meta. If they're too good compared to the others, they get brought down. If they're not good enough, they brought up. But what happens? You might have 500 different legendary items in Diablo 3. But that is just a complete illusion that there is actually variety. What you actually have are about 2 viable builds per character per season. And that basically depends on what items they've released. The actual variation within a game that has freaking hundreds of items is absolutely terrible because of the progression. And the same thing applies to skills. You have these, let's say 15, I want to say about 25 different skills in total for each character. You've got 6 skill slots. I'm not going to do the maths. That is a crap ton of different combinations you can use. Who gives a crap? Because at the end of the day, you have to go on a forum to find out what's the meta in order to actually play at the sort of quote-unquote end game level. It's certainly true that you can pick any combination you can play through, and for the first week you might have a little bit of fun, but as you ramp up the difficulty, because you'll run out of stuff to do if you don't, because difficulty is tied with content in most games, well, basically you realise that there aren't all these options. You've got 2 builds to use with 2 specific gear sets. You might be able to change 1 item if you're lucky, and all of these skills that are wonderful are, well, basically 90% not used, and all of these items that have been beautifully crafted are completely feckin' pointless. Both of this is a problem due to progression, and what this does is it not only affects the single player experience, because it means that your damage varies wildly and you're constantly trying to chase a point of sort of, or rather get out of a point of inadequacy so you can get to the next stage. But this also sort of leaps and ekes into the co-op of the game with such high damage variation. So giving my example earlier, my skeletal mage damage varying of something like 7,000% damage it changes just from these few items. It means if my mate doesn't have those items and I do, and we want to play together, one of us or both of us are going to have a shit time. And that's just the reality of things. I've been playing Diablo 3 now for about 2 weeks in the absence of anything Martyr related to play, because we've not had new content, obviously. Do still enjoy the game. But because of this, it means I either have to, let's say I've got the better gear, my mate's got the bad gear. What happens is I play at his difficulty and I kill everything in one hit. He just walks around basically following me, hoovering up freaking items. That's boring for both of us, especially after hours. And then the other option is we play at my difficulty. I have a tougher time because I'm carrying 2 people, and he stands there basically with his thumb up his arse waiting for gear to drop. And neither of us are having fun. It means that 2 people cannot jump into the same game and have the same experience. And I've played a few hundred different Greater Rifts over the past couple of weeks, and not once have I thought all 4 people. This is in public games, random people every time. Not once have I thought all 4 people are contributing equally towards this rift, and that is a massive, massive issue. It's nothing like playing a co-op game or a MOBA where everyone's having their part and sort of doing their thing. The only way you can ever get that experience is if you make a new character and you play at a crappy difficulty, or if you keep playing the game for a couple of months and you both manage to gear with the completely best stuff. Oh, and if you went on the forums to look up what's quote-unquote meta. So co-op, progression, massive issue. And as well as the issues in trying to just get a game together where you both feel comparable, is you've also got this issue with PvE elitists. That's right, I've been kicked out of games, not because my build is bad, just because the weapon I have is inadequate, or rather they think it's going to be inadequate. I've been kicked out of games because my overall character level is that of someone that's played for 2 weeks, despite the fact my gear's actually very good, and I know exactly how to play in certain situations. It doesn't matter, because you don't look like you're good enough. Anyone that says PvP comes with elitism, I'm sorry, variation in play comes with elitism. That is all. If someone is doing 5 times more damage than someone else, because maybe it's skill, maybe it's item, then that's what leads to elitism. If everyone's on a similar sort of playing field, a lot less of it. But on the subject of PvP, if you can't balance co-op, how the hell are you ever going to balance PvP? And that's why Martyr, I believe, is not going down this route, because Diablo 3's PvP was never going to work. Ever. Unless they removed all gear from the PvP and turned it into a MOBA where everyone had sort of a based stat, or like Warframe where you have your pre-equipped sort of items you can pick before you go in. But no one would want to do that because you've just invested about 500 feckin' hours grinding this gear. No one then wants to say goodbye to that gear while you play in PvP. So progression equals death of PvP. So in summary, what we've talked about so far is too much progression creates a massive range of damage, it creates miserable players, and what I'd like to do now is a brief summary, which is basically what we've said thus far is progression, or rather too much progression, leads to inflation of damage, which is a range of damage. It creates players in co-op having a bad experience. It actually limits build variety, and it actually limits skill availability and variety, etc. It basically just kills any variation within the game and creates a form of quote-unquote meta that is viable. And then of course the co-op experiences and PvP gets murdered as well. But I would like to just recap on the previous point I made about players fixating on getting better gear. And again, this is talking a bit about a subjective experience, but many players, many players that I've seen and I've met resent actually having to play the game to get the gear. And this is the most bizarre thing to me. I scratch my head that people, if someone says to you, why would I bother playing the game unless it's to get better items to do more damage? What they're basically saying is that they don't like playing the game, they just want to be able to play the game and kill more stuff, or do stuff better, or do stuff faster. But they actually, there's a sort of a resentment of having to play to get the items. People, if you're not enjoying the actual grinding process, the actual playment or enjoyment of the game, why the hell are you doing it? Why the hell are you investing time? So it does reassure me slightly that Inquisitor Martyr is going to say, hey, this is exactly why we want you to play the game. For the loot, yes, it's going to be a loot-driven ARPG, but there's going to be so much more for you to play this game for. That excites me. However, it does concern me at the same time, because there will be that little bit of a lack of addiction to the game, and that's really what loot-driven stuff does, is it makes you an addict. It makes you feel crap until you get your fix, then you feel slightly better for a little while, then you feel crap again until you get another fix. That keeps people hooked for a long time. Well, some people anyway. And, well, I'm really curious to see how this is all going to play out. But guys, I just wanted to have a little rant about the dangers of scaling, and rather too much scaling, because it is something I feel like we crave as a community, and I think it's completely natural to do that. Inquisitor's not going to do much of it, which is a really interesting direction. It could blow up in their face. It could go horribly wrong. If all of the other stuff that is basically incentive to play isn't there, then, well, they've got a game that just no one will want to play. But if they did it right, maybe, just maybe, it might be a game that people actually enjoy playing, which would, hey, take us back to the 1990s, where you played games like frickin' Sonic the Hedgehog, where you didn't progress at all. You just played the game because you enjoyed it. You had your 3 feckin' lives. When they were done, you turn your console off and you throw it out the window because you don't have a frickin' save game function. Hopefully we go back to those days where we're actually just playing a game because we want to play it and enjoy playing it and finding new things and getting further and stuff like that. Getting new items, of course, a handy little side quest, I hope. Guys, and on one final concluding remark of the evils that I think progression has brought to the gaming world, you start taking games that rehash content, and you take Path of Exile Diablo 3 for example. Diablo 3 is more guilty of this. It took them something like 10 years to make this game that has a campaign that can be done in about 2 hours. Then what they do is they make you play it again for better weapons. Then what they do is they make you play it again for better weapons. Then what they do is they do that about 4 more times, and when they're finally done making you play the same campaign that took them 10 years to make, obviously in addition to the other stuff, basically they just throw in new weapons every time. For me, if you're making a game that just does this, it's lazy. it's a poor way to keep players motivated to play your game. If they don't actually enjoy playing it, for me that's an issue. For me, that's why I want to play a game. Not just to get a bigger axe that's twice the size of my body. I want to actually enjoy what I'm fucking doing. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this rant. I hope you found it somewhat entertaining, and apologies for the Diablo 3 footage if you found it offensive, but hey, it is a pretty good game, and I would recommend the Necromancer class. Bit of fun, Season 4 starting soon, quote unquote, and Inquisitor Martyr patch coming at you real soon. We're going to see that in the stream tomorrow. Guys, take care, see you next time.